Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. So happy to have you with us today. You ever think about how tough it is to get started in life when you move out of your parents' home, for example? You have to get a job, find a place to live, and cope with all of the problems and issues that come at you day in and day out. Now, imagine doing that as a newly released inmate. You come out of prison, labeled as an ex-con. You probably don't have a great family support system, and now you need a job and a place to live. It can be overwhelming for the thousands of men and women who are released from prison every year. Trying to help them overcome the many obstacles are organizations like Pioneer Human Services in Seattle, Washington. Joining us now to share with us the struggles and solutions is Pioneer's own CEO, Karen Lee. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's what you're going to hear on my podcast, Open Mic. I'm going to tell you things that most lawyers won't tell you. We expose the truth and bring you justice. I want you to go for the win in law and in life.
You want an honest man, but you don't understand. I want to be here when.
Nice to meet you, Mike.
Hi, Karen. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Open Mic. On our show, we do lots and lots of episodes from people getting out of prison. And usually it's people who were wrongfully convicted in the first place, which has its own troubles and struggles. And, I was reading through your website and looking at all the great work that you are doing, helping people who are getting released from prison and jail. There's lots of things that these folks need to adjust on the outside. So let's just start with housing, because a lot of the people we've interviewed talk about how there's just no real support system for housing. Their families aren't there for them a lot of the time, unfortunately. Tell us about those struggles and tell us what you guys are doing for them.
Certainly. Housing is probably the biggest challenge that people face when they are coming from incarceration. There haven't really been a lot of studies, but the few that have been done universally have statistics that say something like 1 in 10 people that are homeless have a conviction history. In some of the programs that we offer to individuals, 50% of the people that are coming out of incarceration have insecure housing plans as they leave and as they transition. So it is definitely a serious challenge that I think we should address in society. And then to compound that challenge, there is discrimination by landlords. When people are exiting from incarceration, particularly if they've been incarcerated a long time, and I will come back, Mike, and talk about people that are wrongfully convicted and have a sudden release date. It's even a larger challenge for those individuals because they haven't had the planning time while they were incarcerated to release.
Good point.
It is a serious challenge that I think that we have the obligation to address in society. So if someone needs to rent an apartment, you or I, we drive around the city that we live in, we decide the neighborhood that we want to live in, then we decide we want to rent a townhouse, triplex, duplex, apartment, a condo. Once we make those decisions, we sort of look at how much we earn and what we can afford, and we save up money for a down payment. And so when it's time for, I'll call it a civilian in this case, someone who has not been incarcerated during our show, I will call a civilian. So as a civilian, we will fill out the rental application, pay $35. We find out in a day or two that we've been approved. We paid the deposit, and we move in at the end of the month. Well, just imagine that you don't have any down payment money. If you can get that from a resource in the community, you then have to decide what you can afford, and you're searching for employment at the same time. So by default, you have to be in the lowest income area of town. Then on top of that, you fill out an application, and you call and you talk to the rental manager, and you ask, do you accept people that have a felony conviction? The rental manager, the property manager, will answer, well, it's a case-by-case basis. It depends. Submit your application and we will let you know. And time after time after time, people that are formerly incarcerated, they pay the $30, $40, or $50 to submit their application, and then it comes back denied because it's a racket.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they don't have a lot of money to start. Some people only get $40 when they release.
Wow.
How are you going to be able to afford any place to live with that amount of money? So it is definitely something that we do our best to offer here in Seattle with the apartments that we operate, but we don't have enough for everyone, and more often than not, when you do reach out to Pioneer, it's quite often that we're full because we don't have in our in what I would call our inventory of apartments, we don't really have a shelter emergency type of room. We have places you apply and then you rent. And that is something that we are working, but we have over 500 units of permanent housing that we are proud to own and operate. And the newest apartment building we just built and brought online last year. But housing is a serious, serious problem. And even our older properties, we are trying to get them rebuilt as quickly as possible because they're not modernized. So, but we're a nonprofit. We can only afford so much at any given time. So when we often raise money and we talk to people that are in philanthropy, we'll ask them, can you please support our organization so that we can do our best to provide a clean, safe place to live while people are trying to get their lives back in order. So as you can just tell from just that little snippet of a story, how big of a challenge that it truly is.
It's a massive challenge. I'm impressed. I mean, 500 units seems like a lot of units.
It's a lot of units, but it's not nearly enough.
No. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can use more. Is the government, either the state or local or federal government, subsidizing, I assume?
Some of the units are subsidized, and there's a couple different methods. Some units we get a voucher. We can get a HUD voucher that kind of comes through your county. The challenge with that, when you accept those vouchers, is that you have to accept who they tell you to accept. And so if the person that supplies the voucher says, I don't want this type of offender, I don't want someone that used meth 15 years ago, then a person that's exiting incarceration that had a particular crime type can't live there. So typically when we do have vouchers, it's for a specific population. It might be for justice-involved veterans, which is an important population.
For sure.
It might be for someone with a mental disability. So we have to be very careful, and we can't just have the entire apartment building be set aside with vouchers because the vouchers aren't open to everyone. So we try to balance all of those things. When people come in Washington, certain categories of people exiting prison will have a voucher from the Department of Corrections, but that particular voucher will not cover 1 month's rent. So it has to be supplemented to so that they can live in our building. And the last thing that I'll say is a lot of your episodes, you've talked about people that have been convicted unfairly for whatever reason. Maybe they accepted a plea bargain because they were afraid of the trial process, or they didn't have any money or other options. Well, if someone is released, let's say there's, if they are released immediately and they are not on supervision in our state, then at the point that they walk out the door of that prison, the Department of Corrections in Washington doesn't have any jurisdiction, doesn't have any obligation to support that person financially. So that means that all they have is the shirt on their back. And if they had a long sentence, maybe if they had a long stay of incarceration, maybe their mother, sister, brother, aunt, uncle passed away, and they truly don't have anyone. Maybe they plea bargained to a crime that they didn't commit, or and it had a sexual component to that charge. Then that person is even has an even more difficult time finding housing. So it is a significant problem, and we believe that basic housing is a universal right. It's a fundamental right, and everyone deserves housing, regardless of whatever has happened to them in their past.
For sure. I agree with you. I remember during one of our earliest episodes, we've done, I believe, 10 exonerees now, really wonderful people that we've met on this show, and some who've become good friends. And they've literally explained to me from the day we met that if you commit a crime that you actually you did your time, you get out, you get all kinds of benefits or help with the prison system. They help you find a job. They help you find housing. They help in some, listen, it's not a fabulous help, but they get some help. If you're wrongfully incarcerated and you get that conviction overturned, like you said, you go out with a shirt on your back with no help,
nothing,
no resources. You don't get all the parole benefits. You don't have any assistance. And I was shocked by that. Absolutely shocked by that they made that distinction, and they cut off these people who didn't have any business being there in the first place, yet they're helping people who had business being there. Not saying that they didn't deserve help, but they should make it equal help. They should help everybody.
Exactly. I mean,
so frustrating.
Part of incarceration, we would hope, is what we call reentry planning, where where people are offered education. They have the chance to get their GED, their associate's degree, skills, so that they can live and support themselves when they're released. When someone is exonerated and their case is overturned, a lot of times the prisons have 24 hours to release you. And then depending on the type of their original sentence, in our state, if you're on like a life sentence, or if you're on a 30-year sentence, you're not eligible for education, and you're not offered reentry planning, because they don't see a reentry for you as being realistic. So that means that you wouldn't have received the drug treatment that you may have needed, and you would still be carrying all the trauma from the incarceration itself. And then you're trying to navigate in this world that has changed since when you were first put inside.
Which is challenging, because a lot of these people coming out, they don't know, they've never seen a cell phone. They don't know how to do certain things. I'm curious about, with the thousands of people that you've helped and worked with, what are some of the common stereotypes that people have about people who've been incarcerated?
How long do we have for this?
We got as long as you want.
I would say that a common stereotype is that the person is Black, because while Black people and Black men are overrepresented, not all people that are incarcerated are Black. So I'd say that that's one stereotype. And I would say that a person that had another stereotype is that a person that has been formerly incarcerated isn't a good worker, that they're lazy and shiftless. That could be farthest from the truth. That they that person hasn't ever been a victim of a crime, and that they have suffered trauma in their past. I think that I think many of the stereotypes come from the TV shows that we watch, and unfortunately, shows that many Americans, love, like Law and Order and all the spinoffs from Law and Order. Um, I think that people that make poor choices are portrayed in a way that it's easy to hate and to be fearful when you don't know them, and that is furthest from the truth. I would also say that the type of crime that the person committed doesn't really have a bearing on the criminogenic risk going forward. So people will tell me, "Oh my God, you're involved with murderers. You talk to a murderer," and I have several answers to that. And first of all, a person can be a driver in a gang-related shooting and still receive a murder charge. They may not have been the actual person that pulled the trigger. They could have, not gotten the proper legal representation, so they pled to that charge.
Mhm.
So just because a person has a charge of murder doesn't mean that they actually pulled the trigger and harmed someone. Now, there are people that have pulled the trigger and harmed people, and many of them, all they can do is live their life the best they can. There's no amends to be made. But they want to live the best of, the rest of their life to the best that they can, and then they want to make their peace with God. Maybe they can make peace with the victim, maybe they can't, but that's all they can do. And once they've completed 20 years, they're 40, 45, 50, their criminogenic risk is as low as yours or mine. If you're an old gang member and you're 50, do you really think that if you walk out the doors of prison, that a gang member of today that's 17 is going to invite you back?
It's a really good, no, it's a really good point, Karen. So what kind of things, how do we change these stereotypes? How do we change people's beliefs? These are all really good points, but I got to imagine, you're helping educate people, and you have ideas on how we can stop this cycle.
I think podcasts like this one that humanize people, I think are very, very important. I also think that, maybe as we're coming out of COVID, we've learned something about ourselves. We've learned that we need touch, and we need to have friendships, and we need to have relationships, and maybe this will help us, rejuvenate our humanity, that we can believe a little more in other people. If you allow yourself proximity to be close to someone that is different than you, that maybe, spent some time in jail, listen to their story, and you will see that there's a person in there. And more often than not, that person has the same hopes and dreams that a civilian has. They want their parents to be proud of them. They want their children to be proud of them. They want to fall in love. They want to have a place to live. They want to do something every day that makes them feel valuable in society. They want to vote. They want to pay off their legal and financial obligations. They want to be treated like they're a part of society. They don't want to be a stigma. They don't want people to grab their purse when they walk by. So even if the person that you're talking to is heavily tatted, let's say, and has chosen to not have their tattoos removed, it does not mean that there's not a kind person that has a heart, that has a story.
That's a really good answer, and I liked on your website, Karen, about the no labels
Mm-hmm.
and how you're educating people, not to call someone out of prison an ex-convict or an ex-con or an ex-felon, and you give a whole list of words, and the word that you think is appropriate is tell our listeners.
I think you should always try to identify the individual first. So when we started this show, I heard the word inmate, and I just think that it's easy to call someone that. So try to start with saying an individual who has been incarcerated.
Hmm.
So you're not labeling that person.
It's a
An
good point.
individual who has been in jail, an individual who has a felony conviction. So you're just not calling them
Mhm.
felon,
No,
convict,
you're personalizing it,
inmate. Absolutely.
making them a human being. You're calling out the fact that they're a human being who might have made a mistake, who might have been incarcerated, might have been wherever, but they're still
Might
an
have hung out with
individual.
the wrong crowd.
Right.
Might have just happened to be in the car when there was a shooting, you know? So there's many
Yep.
stories.
No, it's smart. I like that.
Mhm.
Um, let's go to the jobs. Obviously money, helps with adjustments. I know you guys aren't handing out lots and lots of money when an individual who was formerly incarcerated gets out. See how I did that right there?
Mhm. Thank
Um,
you.
so what happens when are they facing the same discrimination when they're trying to find a job as they're trying to find an apartment?
Yes,
Is that worse?
absolutely.
Is that worse?
It's probably not worse. I think it's different. And keep in mind, I have not personally experienced this. I've experienced it as a service provider. So I've seen the impact on others. And one of the common stories that we hear from people that come in and they want to participate, we have job training classes, we have resume workshops, and we end our full meal deal class we call Roadmap to Success, which is a 3-week, 8-hour day cohort based class where people that participate really, get case management, employment counseling, access to treatment. We ensure they have housing. They really get the full meal deal to set them on their path to success. And what I've heard from many students over the years is that um, they'll be offered the position, they'll accept it, they'll be there for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then they'll be asked to leave because their background check came back.
Hmm.
And that's just, once that happens several times, it's completely disheartening. It can cause relapse. So that's a common experience. Another common experience is that um, individuals who have felony convictions, they're underskilled when they enter the labor market, upon entering the labor market. And in jobs where people can move up, folks that have a felony often do not have the same opportunity to move up the career ladder, and they stick to the bottom. And that stickiness is it's been studied quite a bit, and something like only 6% of people who have a felony conviction move beyond the bottom 20th percentile of all wages.
Is
So
it
we
is
know it's a
Yeah.
problem.
I mean, I'm thinking back to the housing conversation. I mean, the stereotypes, the stigma. If you're in a state that you have to report these things to a job, I mean, do you have any compassion's not the right word, but do you have any um, can you understand where the employers are coming from, any fear, or you just think it's completely misplaced?
I think 90% of the fear is completely misplaced. I mean, so much of it. And there are certain jobs that you probably should not have when you first come out of when you come from prison. And what comes to mind is a person that had an embezzlement sentence and maybe had a 5-year sentence. You would not want to hire that individual as your chief financial officer.
Mhm.
It's too proximate.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, could you hire that person into your organization? Absolutely. Right. And we take in our country this blanket approach. No matter what your crime was, you're not worthy for us to hire you anymore. And then every employer that I talk to, they say, well, they take an approach that they're kind of helpless about it. Well, our insurance company won't allow us to do this, or our customers might be uncomfortable, and they
They're looking for
assume,
cover. They're looking for cover.
yeah, and they'll assume that another company will hire them. And so I think that that's not a responsible way to be. Um, 90% of the fear and apprehension is misplaced.
Do you see this? We see so much racial inequities in our legal
Hmm.
system, and we know that by who's going to prison, right? But what
Yeah,
about coming out of prison? Are you seeing the same racial inequities once they're released, once the individuals are released?
it's compounded actually. So
Hmm.
it's not only is it racial inequity, but then you have, the barrier of the felony. And so it's even, I would say it's even worse.
That's interesting. I didn't. So you could be a minority and have a felony. It does compound.
It
it.
compounds it.
The black man may not get the job anyway, even if he wasn't incarcerated, but
Mhm.
you add the felony to him and it's a disaster. And it's sad.
Yes.
And I mean, that's a hard one.
I read a statistic just the other day that during um, our last economic expansion, when unemployment was around 5%, for people that had a felony conviction, the average unemployment was 35%, and Black men was a tick higher, right around 37%, and Black women was even higher than that, something around 42%. So that alone should tell you that that we have a ways to go. And the employers that do open up their places of employment to people with felony convictions in their past, they report that they have lower turnover,
Mm,
loyal employees,
mm.
and there is no difference in how often they call in sick, how well they do at their job than with the civilian workforce that they have. So again, it's not based in fact, this fear that many companies have.
It's interesting. I don't know if I don't know what you're doing out in Seattle, but I don't think here in Michigan they do a great job of getting that message out. I think those are great statistics, and I've never been contacted by anybody. Would you be willing to do this or that? And I'm a business owner, and I have 140, 50 employees. It's just interesting that those type of statistics are meaningful.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We have a company, a nonprofit here called What's Next Washington. And so what they're trying to do is they've developed a tool that an employer can use to help them feel better about hiring folks that have been formerly incarcerated. So hopefully that will help make a difference in Washington.
Hmm. As a society, how do we level the playing field and eliminate or reduce these social inequities other than podcasts? I mean, what are you guys seeing and how are you doing it?
I think that we all have to come together and work to change hearts and minds. And I think we have to pull every lever that we have. I'm in a group of Jewish rabbis in Washington, and I asked them to start with their congregations, ministering and preaching on love for others. So that's one start.
Yeah.
You know, uh, using any bully pulpit that we have so that we can begin to break down this barricade that we all have around our hearts when it comes to people that are formerly incarcerated. I often talk to folks and they'll say, well, I've got a cousin that's been in jail or prison, and, he just never, it's something to the frame of he could never do right. And I asked that person, what trauma led that person down that path? And they'll say, well, he never did well in school. And then he got caught up in the wrong crowd. Or they'll say, drugs are involved. I mean, there's just there's several stories, right? And he was always a difficult child, never could follow rules, right? I mean, and I'd say, well, what type of services have you given that individual? Where there's been some, or has it just been more like a whip? Some people never do become what we call pro-social, but I would submit to you that that's less than 5% of the prison population today. Everyone else, they want to be a part of the society that we live in, and they want to be treated as an equal.
Is expungement a major part of this? Is expungement an answer that if we freely give it for the categories that they're giving expungement, we know that they're not giving expungement for the most violent crimes and some sex crimes, but for the vast majority of crimes, people are some states are starting to be more liberal with expunging the crimes. And then if somebody applies for a job or housing, they can legally say they are not a felon or a past felon or an individual who committed a past crime. Are you guys advocating for that? That seems like a answer.
Yes. I think that the ability to look on Google to see if someone has formerly been incarcerated or even arrested, I think that type of information is damaging. In Washington, most of our expungement processes relate to juveniles and things that happen to a juvenile when they're under the age of 18. And for adults, we have vacation. And we've certainly been working hard to seal those records, for a lack of a better word, and expand and make easier the process to have a sentence vacated. But it's not an easy row to hoe. There are many people that believe that once you commit a crime, you have a C on your forehead or an F on your forehead for the rest of your life. And that's, unfortunately, some of those people with that mindset are in our legislature.
I don't disagree, unfortunately. Are you optimistic, though, with new president and new Congress that we will see some improvements made to the criminal justice system?
I'm very optimistic with this president. And one example is when Barack Obama was president, they had a National Reentry Week, and it was in the last week of April. And then when President Trump was elected, that whole recognition went away. And when President Biden was elected in January, April, again, we're talking about Reentry Week nationally. So, and this is before he's really even had a chance to kind of get his feet on the ground. So, I am very, very confident. And interestingly enough, reentry is an issue that moderate Republicans support. Because moderate Republicans want to see people working and productive and good employees and paying taxes. And so really it's more when we get into politics of, the far right, where you see people being unwilling to give others another chance.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my fingers are crossed, and I know yours are as well. Karen, this has been great. If people want to learn more about Pioneer Human Services and how they can contribute, how do they do that?
They come to our website, and we've got a lot of information on the website that we think that people would find interesting. So please peruse the website. It's pioneerhumanservices.org. And I also encourage you to take our mass incarceration quiz. So pioneerhumanservices.org/quiz, where you can see what you know and learn something. And follow my LinkedIn. If you, I would love for you to follow my LinkedIn. It's Karen Lee, Pioneer Human Services, and join our Facebook. We also tweet. Just become a follower of all the work that we do. We would appreciate that.
I'm going to do all of those things today. I'm going to encourage our listeners and viewers to do that. We're going to add links to our show notes. We'll send you a copy of it all so you can also share. And it's such a pleasure talking to you today, learning from you today. And thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Karen Lee from Pioneer Human Services in Seattle, Washington. Some really interesting ideas. I'm going to go take the quiz. I wasn't very good at quizzes and tests in my childhood, but I'm going to take this one until I got to law school, that is. I did okay in law school. If you know anybody who needs to hear this episode, learn some of these things, forward this to them, comment, like, please subscribe. As you know, you're one of over 3 million listeners to this show. It's been a crazy run, so many viewers and listeners, and we just love you all for tuning in. Thank you for being interested in this. It really makes a difference. We do need to educate, like Karen said. We do need to pass the word along. People need to know how to refer to people who have formerly been in prison or jail. I learned that. I'm going to do my best to try to use better words when I'm talking about people who were formerly incarcerated. They are individuals. These are people. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a fan. Talk to you next time.